Chapter 4. No Easy Way.
Taylor got up in the morning. He did not have any hangover or any pain that normally came with drinking for him. Scott was quick behind him. "Hell of a night, eh?" Scott said. "Could say that again," Taylor said, raising an eyebrow. They were dressed in their own clothes that they had come in. They ate breakfast with Thorane in the lounge. Taylor ate lightly and then excused himself so he could take one last look through Thorane's book collection. Scott sat with Thorane and had a cigarette. "There's no easy way out of here. One way is the way you came in. The other is somewhat like an incredibly powerful water slide. I don't suggest it. It can be very painful. And the last is the best, but very frightening as well. You need to jump down a shaft that drops about 80 feet straight down." "Wouldn't that break our legs?" "You may, and you'll heal. You will need to learn control over your body and slow your descent. You will not be able to float yet, but you should be able to slow yourself down enough that you don't do too much damage. And if you do, you'll be able to limp home. It will heal itself by the time you get to the road," Thorane replied. Taylor and Scott were trying to adjust to all their new limits, or lack thereof, that they were now a party to. "Well, I guess we have to trust you on that one. I ain't going back down that tunnel," Scott said. Taylor looked around the room. In truth, he had hoped they would not have to leave that day. He had even thought of asking Thorane if they could stay one more night. However, that morning he saw how excited Scott was to get home to Tiffany. Taylor decided it would probably make Scott pretty sad to stay. Taylor honored that and decided to go. They got up and went to the room with the shaft. All the power and network lines came in through this shaft, but it was about 5 feet in diameter, so there was still room to jump down. They would have to control their falls. Thorane smiled. "I look forward to when you return. It's been very nice to have you around." "It was an honor to meet you," Taylor said. Thorane let a small chuckle escape him. "The honor is mine," he said, and he hugged them both. "Here, you will be needing these," Thorane said, handing them both a pair of sunglasses. Scott walked over to the shaft and prepared himself best he could. Then he closed his eyes and stepped off into the shaft. He fell down the shaft and gained speed. Too fast, he thought, but about 65 feet down he started to slow down, and by the time he landed he was still going fast, and his ankle got twisted, but he was able to stand on it and move out of the way. "Travel, Taylor. See the country, but I would be honored if I was the first to bring you to Holland," Thorane said. "That sounds incredible, but I'm going to hold you to that," Taylor said. "And I you," Thorane said. Taylor walked out into the shaft, but he did not drop. He floated. Thorane smiled. "You're going to have to let yourself go and drop," Thorane said. Taylor smiled and shrugged his shoulders and then dropped down the shaft. Thorane made sure he went down and shook his head. "Ongelooflijk," he said to himself. Taylor landed perfectly and walked over to Scott. "You okay?" Scott asked. "Fine, you?" "Fine. Twisted my ankle on the landing, but it already feels like it never happened," Scott, shaking his head in disbelief. They started to walk down the tunnel, and they found a small light once again was leading their way. It was an easy walk, and they came to a hatch, and they were in a runoff water tunnel. They climbed down into the tunnel, and they followed the water for about a half an hour. They saw a pinpoint of light, and their pace quickened. Thorane walked back into his home, to his laptop. He took a sip of coffee and typed a message. "They have left. What now?" Thorane typed in. "We wait. I believe we will hear of their presence quite quickly," came the response. "He is quite remarkable. When he gets to full power, I think he will be quite amazing," Thorane typed in return. "Yes, we figured he would be powerful," the message returned. "I had no idea how powerful," Thorane replied. "I don't think any of us will ever know the true scope of that," the answer returned. The long hike would have normally beat them both up, but they both walked briskly and felt fine. "This is so fucking insane," Scott observed. "Yeah, but it feels..." Taylor searched for a word. "Right. True," Scott said. "Not as bad as the way in, is it?" Taylor asked. Scott rolled his eyes. It's no wonder Theraint doesn't get any visitors, Scott said, laughing. Taylor joined in. They walked toward the pinpoint of light, which slowly grew. Taylor and Scott worked out their story. They had been hiking when they got lost. They had just found their way out the mountain. The only hole in the story is that it makes us look kind of dumb, Scott said to the idea. Well, if the shoe fits, Taylor replied with a smile. Yeah, I guess you're right, Scott returned. Well, it'll work better then. First we decided on the upper ridge, and while crossing the river we fell in and went over the edge, and an eddy pulled us into a cavern, and we crawled through a tunnel, which at points made us low crawl. And then, at the end, instead of going outside, we wound up finding the lair of 100-year-old vampire who's told us about the true history of vampires and then decided to convert us to vampires. Then we jumped down an 80-foot shaft with no parachute or net, Taylor mused. Well, sure, if you make it sound unbelievable like that, Scott returned. They both chuckled and continued to walk toward the light.